Well, hello, Crusaders. Welcome to another tour of our beloved Holy Cross, part 6 in the Hidden Virtually in Plain Sight series. Now, as many of you know, I started offering these online tours at the beginning of the pandemic. It seems like ages ago. And it was a fun way to get through quarantine together, to talk about something we have a mutual interest in, Holy Cross. Never could I have imagined this series would reach 6 episodes. I am so grateful for your participation and interest in this topic. And recently, as I've attended alumni events, thankfully in person now, a few people have come up to me and said, "Hey, I don't remember your name, but aren't you that tour guy?" Yes, I am. As some of you know, I'm Tom Cadigan. I'm blessed to serve as the Associate Director in the Office of Alumni Relations, and I am also a very proud member of the class of 2002. And I've had so much fun putting this virtual tour series together. And one of my primary goals is to showcase the Holy Cross campus and highlight some of its history, mystery, and lore. And today's tour is all about the natural beauty of Mount St. James. So we're going to talk about the trees of Holy Cross. And I will admit, reviewing slide after slide of trees can get a bit, dare I say, tedious after a while. And I don't want to lose your attention after the first few minutes. So while the Holy Cross trees are the entry point, the real focus of today's tour are the names behind those trees. Now, the planting of commemorative trees has long been a tradition at Holy Cross. Several trees honor former students, faculty, administrators, and distinguished campus visitors. They tell a story of how these people helped to shape the college into what it is today. This virtual tour will highlight some, not all, but some of those trees, but especially the people and the stories they represent. And I'm so happy to be with you tonight. We'll be together for just about an hour. And for those joining us live, I encourage you to use the chat function located on your toolbar to introduce yourself and to communicate with fellow alumni, parents, and friends throughout the presentation. You're also welcome to submit questions at any time using the Q&A function also on your toolbar. And near the end, I'll try to answer as many of your questions as possible. So please, fire away. And this tour, this series, is an example of carrying the baton forward. As I've said in the past, I will always be grateful to the man who inspired this idea, the late Father Anthony Kuznevsky. Now, Father K loved Holy Cross and wanted to share its rich history with everyone. And I'm helping him do that, at least I hope. Second, and more specific to this tour, to this edition, I am grateful to Mr. Jim Long, the college's superintendent of grounds for many decades. It was during Jim's tenure that the campus became an arboretum in the early 1980s, a place where a number of trees and shrubs are grown for study and for display. Well, Jim passed away last year, but his impact on Holy Cross and its beautiful, award-winning grounds lives on. This red oak tree, located on Linden Lane, just outside the entrance to Haberlin Hall, which you can see in the background, that's Haberlin back there. This red oak tree is dedicated to him. I took the picture on the left in late August, and the one in the middle, believe it or not, I just took last week. So as you can see, fall has definitely come to Holy Cross. Jim Long is the inspiration for today's tour, and I want to thank him for that. Now, as many of you know, I like to keep these presentations interactive, or at least as interactive as Zoom allows. So we'll begin with a very quick pop quiz. For those of us joining us live, I'm going to put a question up on your screen, and I want you to try to do your best to answer this. So if you bear with me for a minute, I'm going to put a poll up. All right, here we go. I'm going to launch this poll. You should see something on your screen. Approximately how many trees are found on Holy Cross's Worcester campus? Now, I had to put that qualifier in there, the Worcester campus, because since 2016, the college does own 52 acres of land up in West Boylston, Massachusetts, not far from our central campus. That's where the beautiful Joyce Contemplative Center is located. I'm not including that. So approximately how many trees are found on Holy Cross's Worcester campus? And just do your best. This won't be graded, I promise. I'll give you folks a couple more seconds to get your answers in there. And someone gratefully told me, I think I disabled the chat function, so I will try to re-enable that. All right, so I'm going to end the poll, and I'm going to share the results. So it looks like 53% of you say 3,000 trees. 32% of you say 6,000 trees, and we've got a few votes for 10,000, and then actually a few for 1,843. I put that in there just to throw some people off. 1843 is the year the college was founded. We have many more trees than 1,800. The correct answer, for those of you who guessed right, 6,000 trees, approximately. We have approximately 6,000 trees on the Holy Cross campus. So I'm going to stop. Let's see. I'm going to get rid of the poll. There we go. And let me see if I can enable chat. There we go. I think I might have done that. So there are 6,000 trees on the Holy Cross campus, roughly, and most of the plantings throughout campus are New England traditional, meaning the different tree types and varieties are commonly found in the general region of central Massachusetts and in New England in generally. But there's a few exceptions. There's a few species exceptions, and we're going to get into that very, very soon. Let's see. Now, out of the roughly 6,000 or so trees on campus, one that the college takes a lot of pride in, and you can argue is one of our most famous, is this Scots elm located along Fitton Road near the baseball field, not too far from the bottom of our hill. Affectionately called the Teddy Roosevelt tree, it was actually planted by the sitting 26th US president himself during a visit to campus in 1905. And on a rainy, overcast commencement day on Fitton Field, President Roosevelt delivered the keynote address to around 6,000 people gathered in the Fitton Field stands. And that's an actual photo from the ceremony on the right. You can see someone holding an umbrella behind him. From what I've read, it was a very wet, very cold June day. After a quick speech, Roosevelt then awarded degrees to all 37, yes, just 37 graduates from the class of 1905, shaking each student's hand heartily, saying, "Delighted to meet you," or "Glad to know you." As he returned to his awaiting motorcade after the ceremony, Roosevelt planted the Scots elm with the help of a Jesuit. Now, supposedly, as Father Kuznevsky notes, the president turned to Brother Horwadell, who was the Jesuit, and said, "God bless you, brother. May the tree grow." Well, 117 years later, that tree, Teddy's tree, is still growing, as is the college itself around it. Now, in the years that followed President Roosevelt's visit, a tradition took root at Holy Cross. The corny pun intended, I apologize. Sometime before commencement, each graduating class would celebrate a private tree day. So before graduation, a sapling was planted somewhere on campus to commemorate that graduating class. Now check out this photo. In it, the class of 1922, so 100 years ago, the class of 1922 is celebrating its senior tree day. Now, according to the third edition of the Holy Cross Arboretum book, quote, many speeches followed for this joyous occasion. Now, if you look closely, a lot of the people in the picture, students, administrators, they're wearing full suits or they're wearing gowns. So here's to hoping that while listening to all those speeches and talks, it wasn't a hot or a very rainy day. Now, unfortunately, many of those trees planted during the early decades of the 20th century, including this class of 1922 tree, are no longer with us. They were removed for campus building projects or gave way to the natural end of life. And a century is a long lifespan for most trees. At least one, however, remains. This towering small-leafed European linden planted by the class of 1926. And you may have passed under its shade and not really noticed it. Now, fittingly, this linden tree is located along the north side of Linden Lane, near the pedestrian bridge to Stein Hall, and within view, as you can see on the right, of the campus's iconic O'Kane Clock Tower. Now, if these branches could talk, having witnessed the college grow and expand around them, can you imagine the stories those branches could tell? Well, there's one Holy Cross graduate who has the gift of storytelling, and his tree takes us up the hill from Linden Lane, just outside the Hogan Campus Center. Now, as you enter Hogan from its parking lot, this flowering crabapple is just to your left as you enter the building. It's dedicated to alumnus Edward P. Jones from the class of 1972. Now, Jones is a critically acclaimed novelist and short story writer. His 2003 novel, The Known World, received the Pulitzer Prize for fiction. He's also a member of the American Academy of Arts and Letters, the highest recognition of artistic merit in the United States. Now, born and raised in Washington, D.C., Jones has made D.C. and its African-American community the subject of most of his writing. An English major at Holy Cross, Jones was recruited to Worcester as a freshman in 1968 by Father John Brooks, joining a small group of African-American men on the then almost entirely white campus. Jones's classmates and peers included illustrious names such as Clarence Thomas, class of 1971, Ted Wells, class of 1972, and Eddie Jenkins, class of 1972. Now, parts of Jones's Holy Cross journey and those of his Black classmates are featured and author Diane Brady's 2012 book, Fraternity. The cover is on the right. It's a wonderful read that highlights the achievements and the struggles that took place on the Holy Cross campus over 50 years ago. Now, Edward P. Jones is one in a long line of crusaders who have gone on to achieve greatness as writers, publishers, journalists, and wordsmiths. Studies in the humanities, in part, help to shape these future alumni. Equally formative are studies in the natural and social sciences, and many students have used that learning as a springboard to future successes in the sciences. Here's one noteworthy example. Now, outside one of the main entrances to Haberlin Hall, just up from Linden Lane, sits a ginkgo biloba tree dedicated to Dr. Joseph Kirwan from the class of 1953. A Chicago native, Kirwan became the first American physician to go to space 20 years after his Holy Cross graduation. Though he initially planned to go into pediatrics, military service with the US Navy beckoned him. Kirwan became a naval flight surgeon and received his flight surgeon's wings. Racking up thousands of hours as a pilot, he was selected as an astronaut in 1965. 8 years later, in 1973, he was part of the first crewed mission to Skylab, pictured on the lower right. Now, Skylab was the United States' original orbital space station, a precursor to today's International Space Station. This is not for those who are claustrophobic. That was a very tiny, tiny Skylab. Kirwan's three-man crew spent about a month in space between the spring into the summer of 1973. And during that voyage, that month-long span in space was a record at the time. And though also working on various engineering and astronomical experiments, and even taking part in a spacewalk during the voyage, Kirwan was given a mandate to look at the effects of spaceflight on the human body. Now, Skylab was equipped with what was called an in-flight medical support system. Say that 10 times fast. An in-flight medical support system featuring an impressive range of medical equipment and ensuring Kirwan had a good set of doctor's tools to work with. Now, pictured on the upper right, I love this photo, that's Kirwan on the bottom performing a dental exam in close to zero gravity on his crew member, Pete Conrad. Now, following the Skylab mission, Kirwan would go on to lead NASA's medical support initiative for the early space shuttle program, and he was involved in the investigations into the Challenger disaster in 1986. Now 90 years old, Kirwan is retired and enjoying life with his family in Texas. Now, Kirwan's tree is an example of one that is not very common to New England. The ginkgo biloba actually disappeared from the fossil record in both Europe and North America, coming very close to extinction. It was preserved by Buddhist monks in their North China gardens for centuries. The species was rediscovered by Western scientists in the 1800s and is now planted all over the world, including right here on Mount St. James. Now, tradition has it that if you catch a ginkgo leaf as it floats to earth, you'll have good luck. but they're very difficult to catch. Since the leaves are fan-shaped, they fall erratically. So as soon as you think you have one, it darts out of reach. Dr. Kerwin credits his Catholic faith and his Holy Cross education and the faculty who helped mold the future astronaut for much of his personal and professional successes. And throughout the college's history, faculty have left a lasting mark on the students who cross their paths in classrooms, laboratory spaces, or studios. Now, this beautiful flowering crabapple, located at the College Street entrance to O'Neill Hall, the biology building, is proudly dedicated to one such faculty member, Susan Berman, Associate Professor Emerita of Biology. A member of the faculty for 25 years, Professor Berman had been involved in full-time teaching and research until her retirement in 2005. And among the courses that Professor Berman taught were vertebrate history for biology majors and the biology of birds. Now, Professor Berman's research specialties included avian biology and vertebrate paleontology. She was involved in a long-term project determining the genetic and evolutionary relationships among birds, especially parrots. Now, during her tenure at Holy Cross, she had also been involved in campus committee and community work. She was a member of the Committee on Pre-Medical and Pre-Dental Advising almost continuously during her time at the college, playing a major role in the career trajectories of many a future Holy Cross doctor, dentist, and other healthcare professionals. Now, sadly, Professor Berman passed away in 2009. This tree was dedicated in her memory by her biology department colleagues and friends. And here's a fun fact that highlights a bit of Professor Berman's character and spirit. While pursuing her doctoral studies at the University of Pittsburgh, she became, get this, one of the first female volunteer firefighters in the state of Pennsylvania, a trailblazer in every sense of the word. And trust me, we have a lot of trailblazers in the Holy Cross family, some whose selflessness has been an inspiration for others. One such alumnus has a beautiful flowering crabapple tree dedicated to him on the sloping lawn just above the campus greenhouse, not far from the Holy Cross Cemetery. Reverend William F. Davitt, from the class of 1907, a captain of the Holy Cross football team and a decorated student athlete while on the Hill, was a World War I Army first lieutenant and a Catholic chaplain with the American Expeditionary Force. He volunteered for duty in France through the Knights of Columbus shortly after the United States entered the war in 1917. And Father Davitt has the dubious distinction of being the last chaplain and possibly the last American officer killed in the war, 75 minutes before the armistice was signed on November 11th, 1918, which ended the conflict. He passed away 75 minutes before the armistice was signed. The 32-year-old Davitt was mortally wounded by an artillery shell sent across the line, and his death shocked and saddened the Holy Cross community. Now, at the same time, the idea for a chapel on campus a replacement for the old student chapel in Fenwick Hall began to emerge during and after World War I, but especially in connection with Father David's death. Soon, there was agreement that the new campus chapel would be a memorial, not only to Father David, but to all of the college's war dead, all of whom are honored on wooden plaques near the front doors of today's chapel, pictured on the left. So as you enter the chapel from the plaza, you pass these wooden plaques as you enter the building. The plaques keep alive the memory of alumni who died in World War I and subsequently in World War II and in Korea and Vietnam. Crusaders who paid the ultimate sacrifice. The chapel is a memorial to them. Each name on those plaques represents a Holy Cross student who, like William Davitt, like many of us, walked the same halls, frequented different areas of campus, just like all of us. And may we never forget their sacrifice and their service. That is why this sacred space is named St. Joseph Memorial Chapel. It's a memorial to them. Now, just outside our beautiful chapel, along the cemetery wall, sits a weeping cherry tree named in honor of another alumnus who, like Father David, gave his life in service to our country. You may have seen this tree before. It's often photographed and placed in print materials and on the college's website. It's a stunning tree with an equally stunning backdrop. That's the chapel in the background. This weeping cherry tree was dedicated in 1973 to Marine Captain Richard G. Morin from the class of 1966, as well as to all POWs and MIAs. It's referred to as the Freedom Tree. Now, Morin, a Tewksbury, Massachusetts native, majored in economics at Holy Cross and graduated as the outstanding ROTC cadet of his class before entering the Vietnam War. Now, on December 20th, 1968, 2 years after his graduation, the then 24-year-old first lieutenant, a navigator aboard an F-4B airplane, along with his pilot, Captain Richard Kent, departed their base on a night mission over Laos, about 25 miles west of the Lao-South Vietnamese border. In the early morning hours of that December 20th, while conducting its mission, the two-man crew disappeared without a trace. Both Bob Kent and Richard Morin were listed missing in action, MIA. At the time, First Lieutenant Morin was a young husband and a new father to an almost 1-year-old daughter. In June 1974, so 5.5 years after their plane's disappearance, Morin's and Kent's status was changed to died while missing, body not recovered. First Lieutenant Morin was promoted to the rank of captain while in MIA status. And as of last December, so December 2021, the US Department of Defense listed 1,584 US military and civilian personnel still unaccounted for during the Vietnam War. This campus tree honors the memory of Captain Morin and all POW MIAs along with the sacrifice of their families and their loved ones. Now, campus trees, such as this freedom tree, serve as a reminder of friends and classmates who left us too early. Now, while these trees can't bring back our loved ones, they help keep their memory alive in a very real, very tangible way. A more recent example is this colorful flowering crabapple located on the north side of Lehigh Hall, not far, just almost a slope up from the Freedom Tree. This planting is dedicated to Elizabeth Sheehan from the class of 1994. Beth, an English major, passed away unexpectedly during her sophomore year. Now, during her brief time on the Hill, she left an impact on many who crossed her path. Now, in addition to this beautiful tree, which I photographed recently, adorned in its brilliant fall foliage, classmates, friends, and faculty, in addition to this tree, established the Elizabeth E. Sheehan Poetry Collection in 1992, shortly after her death, to honor Beth's love of literature. Volumes of poetry are occasionally added to the Sheehan collection and are available to all members of the Holy Cross community to enjoy. Now, because of the Sheehan tree's location near Lehigh Hall and the other Easy Street dorms, countless students walk past Beth's tree daily on their way to or from class, practice, or Kimball. In fact, there are numerous trees dotted around those Easy Street residence halls. What's neat is that many of these trees join the campus at roughly the same time. In spring 1972, so a little over 50 years ago, Holy Cross students approved funds to plant over 25 trees and shrubs around the upper Hill dorms. Now, they were planted by the grounds department with the help of some student volunteers. And here's a picture on the left from the daily student newspaper at the time, dated April 13th, 1972. If you look closely, you see that the copy cost 5 cents. I don't know if that was a steal or a bargain back then, but that was the daily student newspaper. The Inter-House Council allocated funds for this tree fund to plant trees around the houses or dorms where, get this, pickup football games, scandalous, and other outdoor student activities had, quote, ruined the lawns, according to the student news. Now, more than 50 years later, many of these trees continue to beautify the landscape around Brooks, Clark, Hanselman, Lehigh, and Healy Halls. Now, as a young first-year student, I remember walking past or under that saucer magnolia pictured on the right. I think my screen is blocking the title, but that's a saucer magnolia tree. And I would walk past that every day my freshman year. If you squint, you can even see the window of my old room, Hanselman 234, just above that side door beyond that tree. And it's true that students live in a bubble while on the Hill. They're aware of their surroundings, but don't often take the time to admire and appreciate them. And that was like me. I knew this magnolia was there. I knew it was outside of Hanselman, but I didn't really pay it much attention. I was living my Holy Cross undergraduate life. And I guess that's sometimes true with post-grad life too. We don't always stop to smell the roses, or in this case, the magnolia flowers. And here's another example that may ring true for you. It does for me. During the times you've driven along Southbridge Street, also called Route 12, right at the bottom of the hill, or the times you pulled into Fit and Field for a football tailgate, have you ever noticed this beautiful red maple along that black iron fence by Southbridge Street? Well, this tree is dedicated to Holy Cross student Louis Sakalexis, who took our campus and the baseball world by storm in the last few years of the 19th century. Now, a Native American born in 1871, Sakalexis grew up on the Penobscot Reserve near Bangor, Maine. A talented athlete, he was discovered playing summer league ball in 1894 by members of the Holy Cross baseball team. They kind of stumbled upon him, but it was a successful scouting trip. Though already 24 years old, Sakalexis, raised Catholic, was persuaded to enroll at Holy Cross's preparatory school the next year. He tried out for the college's baseball coach, Jesse Burkett, a future Hall of Famer who played professionally for the Cleveland Spiders. After that tryout, Burkett offered Sakalexis a full scholarship, and the coach was rewarded with 2 outstanding seasons on the field. From 1895 to 1896, Sakalexis compiled an outstanding .444 batting average. He could hit, he could run. He once stole 6 bases in a game against Brown. Now, after that 1896 season, Coach Burkett moved to Notre Dame, and Sakalexis, for whatever reason, followed him. He never graduated from Holy Cross. The following spring, Burkett helped Sakalexis get a contract with the Cleveland Spiders in professional baseball. His first season with the Spiders in Cleveland, that was in 1897, Sakalexis had an impressive debut. He hit .338 and had 16 stolen bases in just 66 professional games. Sports writers adored him. He was nicknamed the Deerfoot of the Diamond, but a foot injury affected his play shortly after, and he was never able to fully recover. Sakalexis also developed a drinking problem off the field. He slumped at the plate and was out of professional baseball 2 years later. And those same sports writers who pumped him up during his rookie season began to turn on him, poking fun of his Native American heritage and his issues with alcohol. It was clearly racist, but accepted in mainstream print culture at the time. Sakalexis returned to Maine, where he tried to rekindle his baseball magic. He played and coached semi-pro ball for a while, but it never really worked out for him. He died at the young age of 42 years old in 1913. Some say bitter, broken, and still suffering from the effects of alcoholism. Now, Sakalexis's world was not a pleasant one for Native Americans. He arrived at the Holy Cross campus in 1895, just 20 years after the Battle of the Little Bighorn. There was a lot culturally, socially, in the way of standing in the way of Native Americans. But he found the Hill, he found Holy Cross to be a welcoming destination. He succeeded here on the Diamond and on campus. and made a name for himself in just 2 short years. So much so, he was named a charter member of the Holy Cross Varsity Club Hall of Fame. Now we have to remember that Sock Alexis attended Holy Cross over 125 years ago, before even Fit and Field existed. And here's a cool picture of what the campus baseball diamond looked like in the late 1800s. This is where Sock Alexis would have played. It was located on the slope near the present site of Carlin and Stein Halls. And though Sock Alexis's diamond no longer exists, his red maple tree overlooks our current baseball field all year long. And because of his advanced age and Native American background, you can say Louis Sock Alexis was an unconventional Holy Cross student in his day. He wasn't the first, and he certainly won't be the last. The college has a history of taking flyers on unconventional students and being better for it in the long run. Here's a more recent example, illustrated by this stellar pink dogwood tree located in the shadows of the new Joanne Chouinard Luth Recreation and Wellness Center, and not far from O'Neill Hall. Named in honor of alumna Claire Burns from the class of 1990, the tree is a testament to the extraordinary impact Claire has made at Holy Cross and the unique trail she blazed as a student, a mentor, and a friend. Now, Claire and her husband, Don Burns, from the class of 1949, were blessed with 8 children, 6 of whom attended Holy Cross. And after all of her children had reached college age, Claire finally had the opportunity herself. At the age of 57, she enrolled at Holy Cross, lived on campus, and in May of 1990, received her Bachelor of Arts in English, magna cum laude. An active student, Claire participated in extracurricular activities, including student musical productions. She related well to her fellow undergraduates, all much younger than herself, and naturally brought different perspectives to the classroom. But Claire had a particular closeness to the hourly employees of the college, those who serve as clerical personnel, dining services workers, public safety officers, housekeepers, and maintenance workers. In Claire's mind, these workers made the college's wheels turn. They represented, to her, the heart of the Holy Cross family. So to honor them and their dedication, in 1997, 7 years after her graduation, the Claire B. Burns Employee Awards were established and endowed. The annual awards provide a sense of recognition for exemplary service to the college. Claire had a strong affinity for Holy Cross workers up until her death in 2010. This pink dogwood tree is dedicated to Claire and her efforts to make Holy Cross a service-oriented institution where everyone is treated like family. And in some ways, Holy Cross is family. Purple runs deep in many a Crusader's vein. And here's a very fun example. And someone who is proof of this, Father Frank Miller, a proud member of the class of 1946. This striking Japanese maple tree, fittingly located outside the Jesuit residency at Ciampi Hall, is dedicated to Father Miller's memory. A beloved figure on campus, Father Miller served as Vice President of Development for almost 22 years, from the early 1970s to the mid-90s. A Worcester native, Father Miller literally grew up in and around Holy Cross. His father, Francis L. Miller, served as the college's first bursar for several decades. And when he became college-aged, the young Frank Miller attended Holy Cross until 1944, when he joined the Navy during World War II. He was stationed in Guam for 2 years. He resumed his studies, like many of his classmates and peers from those early to mid 1940s years after the war. He came back and finished his studies at Holy Cross. As a student, Father Miller had been an infielder on the Crusader baseball team. And from what I understand, he was a pretty talented second baseman, pictured on the left. Now, after graduation, he joined the Chase National Bank of New York, where he worked for a few years, eventually giving up a profitable banking career to enter the Jesuits in 1951. Now, because of his financial background, Father Miller returned to Mount St. James as the college's treasurer in 1961 before assuming the VP role in 1973. Now, throughout his tenure, Father Miller worked closely with then President Father John Brooks and played a key role in strengthening the financial position of Holy Cross and building a network of alumni support. He and Father Brooks traveled the country, attending numerous alumni events and helping to build the strong regional club network that we have today. I love this photo. Check out Fathers Brooks and Miller scoping out some pretty sweet seats at Fenway Park, clearly doing important college business. Check out those smiles on their faces. A devoted son of Holy Cross, Father Miller passed away in 2008 at the age of 82. His impact on our hill, however, lives on in the initiatives he spearheaded and the people he touched. That hill is a special place for many of us. Now, as we come to the end of our time together, I want to emphasize that Mount St. James remains a campus where students come into their own, where they cross that imaginary but very real threshold into adulthood, and where they make meaningful, sometimes lifelong friends. The campus buildings, its pathways, its trees are just a backdrop to what really matters at Holy Cross: the people, the women and men, the teachers and coaches, the priests and lay people who make our campus that special place it really is. And a sense of place matters. It's those buildings and pathways and, yes, even those trees that bring context to our Holy Cross experiences. Where's your favorite place on campus and why? Chances are, if it's outdoors, it's in the shadow of a tree or within eyesight of a campus tree. My favorite place on campus is pictured here. That's the old campus bakery in the center, built around 1844, the oldest existing building on campus. I always liked this peculiar looking structure perched on a cliff overlooking the chapel. Now, a few years ago, this space took on heightened meaning for me. See that pink flowering crabapple to the left? That tree is dedicated to my late parents. It's the Tom and Mary Cadigan tree. My brother PJ, class of 2004, and I gifted it to them as a wedding anniversary present in 2009, just a few days before my mom passed away. My dad would go on to join her in 2014. And I know it's silly to say, but I have always felt a connection to that tree. I sense my parents' presence whenever I pass it. And trust me, I try to pass it quite often. That flowering crabapple honors their memory. It's one of many campus trees that keep memory alive. The Roosevelt memory, the Davitt memory, the Sheehan memory, the Sockalexis memory. Memory, people, place. Those are the lessons in the Holy Cross leaves. Thank you. Ooh, all right. Let me just grab a sip of water. Please send in some questions. I apologize, I never got that chat function to work. But the Q&A is working. So I will pause here and let's see what's on your mind. Let me know what questions you might be thinking. Let's see. Some good questions here. Tom, how did Linden Lane get its name? Just have to back up a little bit. So in the early 1920s, while the college was building St. Joseph Memorial Chapel, at the same time, they wanted to create kind of a grand entrance to see that chapel. In fact, the chapel opened its doors in 1924. So while the chapel was being finalized, a few Jesuit administrators planted several linden trees, basically extending from the College Street entrance all the way, we're pretty close to where the chapel is today. And that over time, that became affectionately known as Linden Lane, because it was just dotted with these linden trees. Sadly, when those trees were planted, that was a dirt road, kind of leading into the campus. And then over the decades, the dirt became cinder, and then eventually was blacktopped, and all of that did pretty bad damage to the roots. And one by one, those original linden trees became sick or got damaged, and they were taken down, and for the most part have been replaced with these very, very high trees, very tall trees that are not linden. They're called skyline locust trees. So that's kind of what dots. That's what dot Linden Lane. I know I've said this before, but I'm glad they kept the name Linden Lane. To me, Linden Lane sounds a lot nicer than Locust Lane, but that's where we get the name. Tom, what's the oldest tree on campus? Where is it? Was it one you went over tonight? That's a great question. The answer is we don't know exactly what the oldest tree on campus is. We have a few hunches. Unfortunately, where some of the oldest trees were located was kind of the lower part of campus. So think of like the level where Fitton Field is located, or where Kimball Hall is located. And there's been a lot of building projects over the years. So some of those probably original trees were unfortunately cut down or became damaged or died for natural reasons. The campus did not become an arboretum until 1982, 1983, when we were really keeping track and categorizing the trees around campus. We think that if it's not the Teddy Roosevelt tree, it's probably one of the trees in that general area, right down by the baseball field as you're kind of entering Fitton Field. Remember, the TR tree was planted in 1905. So that's 117 years old. So we think that might be one of, but it's probably not the oldest tree on campus. And someone asked a question: what's the most unique tree? Like I said, most of the trees on campus are native to the area, are native to central Massachusetts or to New England or to the Northeast in general. That ginkgo biloba tree that I mentioned, named after Joseph Kerwin, that's one of the more unique ones because you don't see ginkgo bilobas growing naturally in central Massachusetts unless they were planted within recent decades for a reason. So that's one of our most unique trees. Another unique one, which I didn't highlight in today's tour, there's a tree in Memorial Plaza. Memorial Plaza is that outdoor bricked area, kind of flanked by O'Kane, Fenwick, and Smith Halls. It's dedicated to the Holy Cross alumni who passed away in the 9/11 tragedy. But in that plaza, there's actually a tree dedicated to Father Brooks. And it was planted as a gift by the class of 1984, I believe, for one of their reunions. That tree, I believe, is called like a Franklinia. I think that's the official name of it, the Franklinia. It's a very rare tree, and from what I understand, similar to ginkgo biloba, people thought it was extinct, but it was actually discovered or rediscovered in the Georgia area, several decades ago, and kind of replanted and kind of grown in nurseries. So that's a pretty rare tree as well, the Franklinia, and that's in honor of Father Brooks, who was a treasure himself. So it's probably fitting that a very rare, unique tree is dedicated to Father Brooks. Let me see what other questions. A lot of questions about Louis Sockalexis, and the thought that because of him, the Cleveland Spiders, the professional baseball team he played for, took on the moniker the Cleveland Indians, and there is some truth to that. Sockalexis took the baseball world by storm. He had as impressive a rookie debut as had ever been had prior to that. Think of like a first round draft pick who just crushes it in professional sports. That's what he was. And sports writers gravitated toward him. He offered good copy, because of his background, because of his style of play. So he became very popular. He became, I guess you could say, a national baseball figure, at least a regional figure in the Midwest. But then when his career took a turn, and he slumped and he struggled on the field, those same sports writers really turned on him, and you kind of saw the racism that was very apparent in that day. The Indian, and also back then, we kind of, this is kind of foreign to all of us, but baseball teams back then changed their nicknames all the time. The Cleveland team was also called the Naps at one point, named after a great player, Nap LaJoy. They were the Spiders. And then shortly after Sockalexis left baseball, they took on the nickname the Indians. And maybe some of that could be attributed to him, and just kind of the ethos that he left in that area and on that franchise. There's also speculation that I believe it was the year before he left baseball, whomever the owner of the Spiders was in financial trouble. So he basically traded his entire team away, except Sockalexis, because he was struggling so much, because there were rumors of his off the field antics. He was untradeable. So they kept him. And maybe that's part of the reason why the Indian name kind of came about. But there is some thought that because of Sockalexis and what he was able to accomplish and kind of the name recognition, that's how the Indians took on that nickname. Um, there's a question here. Were trees planted for past Holy Cross presidents other than Father Brooks? Very, very good question. I know that there were a few trees planted for some of our earlier presidents, right around the turn of the century into the 1920s. I don't know of any off the top of my head that are currently existing, that are named after presidents. I don't believe some of our more recent presidents have trees named after them. A lot of Jesuit administrators have trees named after them. Remember Father O'Halloran? He has a tree. Father Nelligan has a tree. We talked about Father Miller. So there is a number of Jesuits who have Father LeBran. Father LeBran has a tree named after him. So there are a lot of trees named after members of our Jesuit community. Let me see. Maybe I just have time for one more question. I want to be conscious of everyone's time. Is there a tree guide for the campus? Yes, there is. So like I said, we are a dedicated arboretum, and every 10 years or so, and I say so because I think COVID played a factor in this, the college publishes an arboretum book, which lists all of the commemorative trees on campus and does a little bit of a write-up for some of them. So there is an arboretum book. In fact, in the follow-up email that I'm going to send with the recording for today's tour, I'm going to link to that book where you can kind of look through and kind of see many of the different trees. Now, I will admit, today's presentation or this tour is only just scratching the surface. I mean, we have hundreds of commemorative trees named after amazing men and women. I only grabbed a few as a sampling, but that arboretum book is definitely an area where you can learn more about the trees on campus. And there's a question here: Do trees have plaques? Not many, and I think that's a college decision. There's a few trees that have plaques. The Teddy Roosevelt tree, which I mentioned, does have a plaque. But most of the trees, in fact, all the trees in the Arboretum, any dedicated tree, any commemorative tree, has a tag, almost like a dog tag, that's burrowed into its bark. And on that tag is a number. That's the number that corresponds with the Arboretum book. And thank God for those tags, because as I was doing research for this tour, I was kind of going off the Arboretum book, but actually, going and checking out the trees, and those tags were a lifesaver for me. So, the next time you're on campus, check out any tree, and if you look closely, burrowed into the bark, you'll find a dog tag with a number. That's the number that corresponds to the Arboretum book. But I do want to be conscious of everyone's time. I can't thank you enough for your attention. I apologize that the chat feature was disabled. I was a history major, not a computer science major, clearly. So I apologize for that, but I am very, very grateful for your involvement, for your interest. And if you have any other follow-up questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. And next time you're on campus, please enjoy the trees, because they really do tell a story of what Holy Cross is about. And I just wanted to kind of showcase as much of that as possible tonight. So all of you, take care. Thank you for joining us.